Okay, picture this scenario. It's a Sunday morning. The room is absolutely packed.
Right.
The band is hitting that perfect swell, during the bridge of the final song and the sermon. It was a heater.
Hmm.
The pastor just delivered one of those messages about the brokenness of the world that just lands right in the center of your chest. You look around the room and you see actual tears.
Yeah, people are nodding, hands are raised.
Exactly. The compassion in the room is just palpable. In that moment, it feels like this group of people is ready to kick down the doors of darkness and change the world.
It's a spiritual high. It feels like irresistible momentum.
It does. It feels like movement.
Mm.
But then Monday morning happens.
Ah, yes.
The alarm goes off at 6 a.m. The coffee spills, the emails start piling up, and the routine, it just sets in like concrete.
Right.
And all that Sunday energy, it just kind of evaporates.
It's gone.
You look back a month later or a year later, and you realize that despite all the tears and all that swelling music, the world didn't actually change.
Nothing moved. That is the Monday morning hangover. And it's a tension that I think almost every church leader I know has experienced and, well, lost sleep over.
Mm-hmm.
You have the theology, right? You have the passion in the room. But when you look at the scorecard, the actual long-term impact on the world, it just doesn't match the intensity of the worship service.
It's incredibly frustrating. It must feel like spinning your wheels in the mud. And that is exactly what we are taking apart today.
Yeah.
We aren't talking about how to preach better sermons or pick better songs. We're looking at a fascinating stack of research and guides on a very specific, very difficult problem: structuring a church that goes and sends.
This is a deep dive into the engine room. We are looking at the boring stuff, governance, budgets, systems, that actually determines whether that Sunday morning passion survives the week.
So the premise here is really interesting to me. The sources argue that the problem isn't a lack of desire.
Right.
Nobody wants to be ineffective. The problem is a lack of missional architecture.
Right. The core idea is that inspiration alone is fragile. It's just, it's volatile. The source material uses this analogy that I think is just brilliant. Passion is like fire.
Okay, fire. It's hot, it's bright, it's captivating.
And it's essential. You can't cook a meal or warm a house without it. But fire, by its very nature, is wild. It burns out quickly if it doesn't have fuel or, it spreads out of control and causes damage.
Sure.
If you want fire to actually be useful to warm a house for 20 years, you don't just need a bigger spark, you need a hearth.
A hearth, okay. The stone structure that contains the fire.
Exactly. In this analogy, the passion for mission, that Sunday morning teary-eyed feeling, is the fire. But the church structure, the budget, the governance, the training pipelines, that's the hearth.
And is that the hearth?
You just have what the text calls episodic enthusiasm.
Episodic enthusiasm. I feel like I've lived that. That's the annual short-term trip where everyone gets hyped for 2 weeks in July and then forgets about it by November.
Precisely. It's a sugar rush. Our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how to transition from that sugar rush to, well, a balanced diet. How do we move from mission being a seasonal decoration to being the load-bearing framework of the church?
So we are moving from accessory to foundation. Now, the authors make a distinction right out of the gate that I think sets the stage for everything else. They distinguish between being mission-minded and being mission-shaped. To the layperson, those sound like synonyms.
They do sound similar, but the difference is massive. Think of it this way. A mission-minded church affirms that mission is important. You ask the leadership, do you care about the nations? They say, of course we do.
Okay.
They probably have a missions committee. They probably support a few missionaries on the side.
But it's a department, it lives in a silo, right? Like the youth ministry or the choir?
Correct. It competes for resources with other silos. A mission-shaped church is totally different. The source argues that for these churches, mission isn't an activity they do, it's the organizing principle of their existence. It organizes the entire life of the church around that sending concept.
And this is where they brought in that theological term, missio Dei.
Missio Dei, the mission of God. It's a theological anchor for this whole discussion. The idea is that the church doesn't invent a mission and then ask God to bless it. God is a sending God. The Father sends the Son sends the Spirit.
So the church doesn't have a mission.
God's mission has a church.
That flips the pressure, doesn't it? It's not about us coming up with some cool strategy to save the world. It's about participating in what's already flowing.
Exactly. It's genetic. It's in the DNA. If you aren't sending, you aren't functioning as a body of Christ. But here's the trap. And the notes call it the local success trap.
Oh, this part was convicting to read. It challenges the metrics we usually use to define a good church.
It really does. The local success trap says that a church can be thriving by every visible metrical parking lot, big budget, great programs, happy families, and yet be failing its global mandate.
Because we measure what we can see. We count heads and dollars.
We measure our own comfort. The text calls this a structural gap. You can be wildly successful in your Jerusalem, to use the Acts 1 terminology, your local context, but if you stop there, you've essentially created a cul-de-sac of blessings.
A cul-de-sac of blessings. Wow, that is a brutal image. So instead of a conduit where resources flow through you to the world, you become a reservoir.
And the water goes stagnant. That's the danger of local exclusivity. Jerusalem was meant to be the launch pad, not the destination. If your structure hoards resources for local consumption, it's a failure of design no matter how polished the Sunday service looks.
Okay, so let's talk about fixing the design. If we want to build this Marth, if we want to fix the structural gap, the source material outlines three main pillars of missional architecture. And they start with the one that usually causes the most fights in the boardroom, the budget.
Always the money. You can tell a lot about a person or a church by looking at their checkbook.
The phrase that jumped out at me from the source was, budgets are moral documents.
It's a heavy statement.
Yeah.
It is. We tend to view budgets as spreadsheets neutral, mathematical, administrative. But the source argues they are theological statements. They tell the truth about what you actually love and what you prioritize.
So what's the shift here? How does a mission-shaped budget look different from a normal one?
Well, it moves from reactive giving to strategic allocation.
Reactive giving. So that's the leftovers model.
Exactly. The leftovers model. We plan our local programs, we pay the staff, we keep the lights on, we upgrade the sound system, and then if there's a surplus at the end of the year or if a missionary happens to visit, we cut a check.
Which reinforces that whole episodic problem we talked about. It's based on mood or surplus.
Right. Strategic allocation means mission is a fixed percentage off the top. It's a first fruits mentality. It says, we are giving this away before we spend a dime on ourselves. But the sources go even further than just a percentage. They talk about doing a missions audit of the entire budget.
This sounded intense. This means looking at the money spent on coffee or the youth retreat, even building maintenance through a missional lens.
Yes. It asks the question, how does this expense help us prepare people to go?
Isn't that a bit of a stretch, though? I mean, how does fixing the AC unit help missions?
Well, maybe the AC unit doesn't directly. But take the youth budget. Are you spending $10,000 on a ski trip that is purely entertainment? Or are you spending that money on a trip that exposes them to cross-cultural ministry? It's about alignment.
Okay.
It's asking, are we funding our comfort or are we funding our calling? It forces every single dollar to justify its existence in light of the mission.
That brings us to the second pillar, the people. Specifically, how we train and send them. And the text draws this really sharp contrast between a sending event and a sending system.
We have all seen the sending event. I mean, it's a staple of modern church life.
The handshake send-off.
Right. The missionary family comes on stage for the last 5 minutes of the service. They look a little awkward standing there. The pastor says, we love the Smiths. They're going to somewhere in Africa.
Right.
A quick prayer, polite applause, and then everyone goes to lunch.
And the church feels good about it. Look, we sent someone. We did our part.
But the source calls this thin. It lacks weight. It lacks commitment. You contrast that with a sending system. And the biblical case study here is Acts 13, the church in Antioch.
This is where they send Paul and Barnabas, arguably the first great missionary journey.
And notice the context. It wasn't a casual decision. It says they were worshiping and fasting. It was a whole community effort. The source calls for commissioning as covenant.
Covenant is a strong word. That implies a binding agreement.
It is. It involves fasting. It involves the laying on of hands, which is a transfer of authority and burden. It's the church saying, we are holding the rope for you. We are tethered to you. Your success is our success, and your suffering is our suffering. It's not just good luck out there.
And part of that system is the preparation. I was surprised by the emphasis on cultural intelligence in the training section.
This is crucial because good intentions are not enough. The mission field is littered with people who burned out because they weren't prepared for the culture shock or the loneliness or the spiritual warfare.
Right.
Sending someone without training isn't generosity. The source argues it's actually a failure of care.
Wow. That's a strong indictment. If you send them unprepared, you're basically setting them up to crash.
Exactly. A system ensures they have the theology, the coping mechanisms, and the cultural tools to survive and thrive. It protects the people. It treats them as valuable assets, not just, cannon fodder.
Okay, pillar 3. We've done money, we've done people. Now, prayer. And honestly, every church says prayer is priority number 1, but the source throws a jab here. It says in many churches, prayer is just spiritual decor.
Ouch, spiritual decor. It's the garnish on the plate, not the meal itself.
It's the bookends. You open the meeting with prayer, you close with prayer, but
Yeah.
the actual decision-making in the middle, that's all human strategy and whiteboard sessions.
Right. We brainstorm, we vote, we plan, and then we ask God to stamp it approved. The mission-shaped church views prayer as discernment.
Back to Antioch again.
Acts 13 says, while they were worshiping the Lord and fasting, the Holy Spirit said. The strategy came out of the prayer. The prayer was the strategy session.
That is a fundamental shift in how you operate. It means you have to be willing to sit in silence. You have to be willing to wait for the directive rather than just rushing to the whiteboard.
It makes prayer the engine, not the preface. If the mission is God's missio Dei, then we can't know the plan unless we are listening to the planner. It requires a posture of listening, not just telling God what we're going to do.
So we have the internal architecture, budget, people, prayer, but the deep dive also covers how the church relates to the outside world. This section on partnerships over projects really struck me as a corrective to the typical American can-do attitude.
It absolutely is. We love projects.
Yeah.
We love to say, we built this orphanage or we painted this school.
Right.
Projects are clean. They have a start and an end date. You can put a photo in the newsletter and feel accomplished.
But the source says projects are often toxic.
They can be. They're transient. If the pastor who loved that project leaves, the project dies. Worse, they can create dependency. We go in, do things for people, and then leave. It just disempowers the local leaders who have to stay there.
So the alternative is kingdom partnerships.
Shared risk.
Yeah.
Mutual responsibility. Long-term commitment. You aren't a donor, you're a sibling. You're walking together for the long haul.
There was a specific case study in the notes about a church in Southeast Asia that I thought illustrated this perfectly. It really shows the difference between trying to be the hero and being a partner. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, this is a great example of moving from Lone Ranger to networked body. So you had this mid-sized church. They had a heart for a very difficult, very remote region in Southeast Asia. They wanted to train local pastors there who had no access to education.
Noble goal.
Very noble. But they tried to do it alone, and they were failing. They didn't have a good curriculum. The logistics of getting there were a nightmare, and their volunteers were just burning out. They were hitting what we call the competence ceiling.
The classic, we can do it all ourselves mentality.
Exactly. So they pivoted. They stopped trying to be the hero. They formed a three-way partnership. First, they partnered with the theological seminary to handle the teaching high-quality accreditation, real degrees.
Smart.
Second, they partnered with an NGO that was already on the ground to handle the logistics and community trust.
And what was the church's role then?
They partnered with a neighboring church to provide mentorship and relationship for those pastors. They did the discipleship piece.
So they unbundled the mission. Everyone played to their strengths.
And the result? They tripled their impact. They created a sustainable network that didn't depend on one church's budget or one pastor's enthusiasm. But to do that, they had to be willing to share the credit.
That's the hard part. You can't put your logo on the whole thing.
Collaboration multiplies fruitfulness, but it decimates ego. You have to decide which one you want more.
That leads us to the workforce. Who is actually doing this mission? The source has a section titled, Every Member as a Missionary. It challenges that clergy-laity divide.
This is the sustainability key. If mission is only for the pros, the pastors, and the overseas workers, you will never have enough manpower. The source argues that going isn't always about crossing a border, it's about crossing boundaries.
Cultural boundaries, relational boundaries.
Right. Your workplace, your gym, your neighborhood, that is a mission field. But for church leadership, empowering this requires a scary shift. The text calls it shifting from a culture of retention to a culture of release.
This feels like the part where pastors start sweating. A culture of retention is what we are taught, right? Keep the people, keep the tithe, keep the volunteers.
It's survival mode. You want to keep your best resources inside the building to keep the machine running. But a culture of release says, we are willing to send our very best.
Like Barnabas and Saul, Antioch sent their top leaders. They didn't send the interns.
Exactly. Imagine a church saying to its best small group leader or its biggest donor, we think God is calling you to move to another city to plant a church, or we want you to spend your energy in this nonprofit. It feels like losing.
It feels like a bad business decision. You're losing your best talent.
But in the kingdom economy, it's multiplication. If you hold onto the seed, it stays a seed. If you bury it, if you send it out, it becomes a harvest. And the notes point to the South Korean church as a prime example of this mindset. They teach mission from childhood.
So it's not just for adults.
No. By the time a kid is 18, they have been hearing, "You are a missionary," for a decade. It creates a multi-generational pipeline. It becomes the default assumption of their life, whether they become a doctor or a preacher.
So if I'm listening to this and I'm a church leader or just someone who cares about my church and I'm thinking, we are definitely more mission-minded than mission-shaped, we are stuck in the episodic, where do we start? Because overhauling a whole culture just sounds exhausting.
It is. And the source warns against trying to change everything at once. That's a recipe for a church split or a breakdown.
So they offer a tool called the Missional Systems Audit.
It's simple but brutal. You list out your systems: budget, training, communication, governance, and you rate them on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 means non-existent or purely reactive. 5 means fully embedded and strategic.
So you have to look in the mirror and admit, okay, our training system is a 1, we have no training.
Exactly. Face the facts. Then the source recommends a 90-day plan. You pick one area, just one.
Don't try to fix the budget and the training and the partnerships all at once.
Right. Maybe you say, in the next 90 days, we're going to establish a pre-field training curriculum. That's it.
And you get specific.
Measurable milestones. Who owns this? If everyone owns it, no one owns it. Put a name on it, and then you review it at 30 days, 60 days, 90 days.
It's about building the muscle memory.
The goal isn't to be perfect in 3 months. The goal is to move from aspirational, something we wish we were, to systemic, something we actually do.
It really comes back to that opening image, moving from the wildfire of inspiration to the hearth of architecture. Passion starts the mission, but mechanisms sustain it.
Passion is the fuel, structure is the engine. You can have a tank full of gas, but if you don't have an engine, you aren't going anywhere. You need both.
There is a final thought in the source material that I found really haunting. It's about legacy. It asks us to look forward to the next generation.
This is the question that should keep leaders awake at night. In a good way, it asks, if your church continues on its current trajectory, will the next generation inherit a system that makes obedience easier or harder?
Wow, that stops you in your tracks.
Are we building the roads for them to travel on? Or are we forcing them to hack through the jungle all over again? Will they inherit a sending system that is ready to launch them? Or will they just inherit some old photo albums of sending events from back in the day?
It puts the responsibility right in our lap. We aren't just managing the present, we are architecting the future.
And that is why that 90-day audit matters. It's the first brick in the road.
Well, that is a lot to chew on. From the theology of the budget to the Monday morning hangover, we've covered the architecture of ascending church. We hope this sparks some honest conversations in your committees and around your dinner tables.
It's worth the work.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.